Welcome to Coffee and Cybersecurity with Cyberpilot. Today I'm joined by Laura Lynggaard Nielsen. You're from, I don't know if you should say it in English or Danish, Alexandra Instituttet or the Alexandra Institute. You're here to talk about humans and cybersecurity, because we often talk about humans and cybersecurity with awareness training, and there's also a big wave of some behavioral science in cybersecurity. But you might have a little bit of a different angle on it, because you are, and now I have to say a word in English, I don't know if I can, but that's fine, an anthropologist, and work from that angle in cybersecurity. And that's really interesting. So you're here to tell us about what that means and how that's useful. Mm-hmm. But maybe you'll also put a few words on who you are and who Alexandra Institute is.
Yeah, sure thing. As you said, I'm Laura, and I have the title of security anthropologist.
Yeah.
But I'm actually a classically trained anthropologist. So there's nothing in my background that directly led me to going into cybersecurity. So I don't know how a computer works.
No.
But throughout my work in security, I've built a functioning knowledge of security. So I usually say that I'm fluent in cybersecurity, and that's of course something I've learned from being in the field. And so what anthropologists typically do is that we take a closer look at what's behind when you just things at a first glance. So what are the underlying practices, structures, values, knowledge, and so on. So we're these types of people who are constantly curious about how things are and why. Mm-hmm. And from my experience, that's a very well-suited approach for security, because there are just so many things about or around the purely technical best practices that will make or break how well we're able to secure our organizations and our products.
So it's researching, if I'm trying to sum it up, researching the people in a company or wherever you're working with, mm-hmm. to understand how cybersecurity affects them or how they understand it. Or
yeah. And it's trying to bridge the gap between the two worlds of exactly people out there and the technical security experts that I work alongside with. So in the Alexandra Institute, we have a lot of people who are very good at cryptography, building secure IoT solutions, security reviews, that sort of thing. Then bridging their world and the world of, for instance, small and medium-sized companies in Denmark.
Yeah. Mm. So that's you actually in the Alexandra Institute, you have like the whole palette of things.
Yeah, we do. And we do different kinds of digital solutions, but I'm in the security.
Yeah. And then I think that leads me to the next question, like, what is it that IT departments and companies out in Denmark can learn from the view of anthropology in cybersecurity?
Yeah. I think it's kind of a well-kept or maybe a repressed secret that cybersecurity actually has a lot to do with people. They're the ones who are clicking the links. They're the ones who will decide what budget you get. They're the ones who are building software more or less securely. So for me, it's very obvious that we need to focus on that area, but it's still very overlooked. I think one of the problems is that there's a kind of transferal of a more technical logic onto humans, basically. So, for instance, if we take phishing tests, for me that's always felt like kind of a human pen test. So we try to shoot at our system to see how well it works. Then we take stock of where the holes were. We try to improve the system, and then we do another phishing test to see if we have then made our parameter stronger.
Yeah.
But humans don't work in this machine-like way, and there are many social implications of doing these phishing tests. But also there's a lot of evidence pointing towards the fact that you you probably won't get stronger security. You will just get a number. And sometimes that makes people feel safer in a way. And I recently read about a study that because what we want people to do is to spot these phishing emails, but when the kind of training that we are using to make them aware is actually more modeled on the logics of a phishing email rather than the way people typically read and spot emails. And I think that's a pity, because we could have two kinds of protection. Where we have the spam filter, the technical protection, and then we could further the way that people are already aware of these emails, but we are overlooking that and then trying to make them think like a machine.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah. So what could you do instead? What is a more human approach, if you can call it like that? What fits better for human learning when it comes to, for example, spotting a phishing email?
Yeah, I think it's important to help people in what they are already doing, because people are busy going about their work, and we're not skeptical of all emails that we receive. So, for instance, what we know is that there's often a lot of doubt involved when we look at these emails, because we get so many, and emails are an important part of our work for many of us. So, for instance, having some social support around that situation of being unsure, because of course awareness is part of the solution. It's good to know that you should check who actually sent it and so on. But then, what do I do when I'm not sure? For us as humans, it's hard to think about a very abstract risk of what will happen if I click a bad link, but it's very clear to me what will happen if I block an important email. Or an email that was actually not a phishing email, but was actually from an important client. Yeah. So there are a lot of so for me in the situation, it can feel more I'm more emotionally affected by what could go wrong if I block too many emails. So I think it's important to have this opportunity to talk to someone else, to deliberate, and to not just pressing a button and then never hear from that person again.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That is not, because it's easy to just block emails, but of course if you're sitting with an important client and you block that email, then that doesn't look good on the next meeting you have with your boss.
No.
But you also need to have somebody to ask if you're in doubt. Because you don't want to sit there alone, and you can also be scared of making a mistake. You're also scared of clicking a phishing link. So it's really about creating that company where the culture is also a part of it.
Yeah.
That you can ask for help, or you can raise your hand and say, I think this is a phishing email.
Yeah.
And then if it's not, then probably somebody knows and they can tell you, I don't think it is. No.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the most important anthropological contributions to security is to actually bring this wider perspective and to be curious about what's going on out there in order to actually get security into people's everyday practices. Another example is that we worked with a company that they perceived themselves as being very dedicated to security. They they developed a kind of software product, and so what we did was diving into their processes in order to find out, so how do you actually work with security, and how could we then make it even better? And what we found was that the individual developers' monthly bonus depended on the number of lines of code that they submitted each month.
Yeah.
So from above, they were saying we're very dedicated to security. It needs to have a place in our processes. But then when we actually looked at how the work was being done, it was very clear that if an individual were to stop and say, hey, I think we need to get a security view of this line of code before shipping, then they would get individually punished on their salary.
Yes.
So it's there are a lot of interesting kinds of disconnects once you start to go into the field.
Yeah.
And I think it also exemplifies very well that having this type of anthropological mindset is not just about people, but it's about opening up for this multitude of social and technical elements that affect our security efforts.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that from here in Cyberpilot, because we also run phishing simulation ourselves. And then one of our guidelines is that if we spot something we think is a phishing mail, then we have to warn each other and we have to like say it to each other, because that's also a way of helping, but it's also a way of getting feedback if it's not a phishing mail. But you're also so scared of taking somebody's time sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's actually kind of a practice to say, okay, I can go to my boss and say, I think this is a phishing email. Maybe we need to communicate that to the rest. But it was kind of a barrier we had to overcome, because you know it's important, but you also know that other people's time is important. So how do you do that and get that integrated in a company as well?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. That's some of the benefits, I guess, that you can get from having this method or this direction to go with your security work. Then I guess the obvious next question would be, how do you do it? Like, what are some of the steps to take if you want to do the anthropologist way of cybersecurity?
I think actually the two of the core virtues of anthropology apply very well to security. First of all, I think you need to maintain a curious and open mind about the logics and beliefs, values of the group of people that you are targeting with your efforts. And then secondly, a key to doing that is to be aware of your own logics and biases that you yourself are bringing into this. Because they might be very different, and your values may seem more right or more natural to you. But we need to have a more, what we in anthropology call term relativistic way. So that one set of values or beliefs or practices aren't better than the other, because we need to try and gap them in order to actually get the security messages out there. And I think one very important thing is to remember as a security professional is that security is your job. It's a big interest for you, and it might even be a hobby to you. So it's something that you read about. It's something that you care deeply about, and you probably don't mind typing in your 28-digit password a couple of times if you get it wrong, because to you it is important. But to other people, other places in the organization who have other jobs, other interests, that's just super annoying. And I think it's very important to be aware of that we aren't the people that we are trying to affect, and we really need to try and put ourselves in their place.
You're kind of an obstacle a lot of the times. Like 2-factor, that's just extra time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's very easy to be prejudiced about the people that we don't know. So I hear a lot of, users are stupid, or IT is just very detached from the real world. But I really encourage you to in the way possible to you to go out into the field and find out more about the context, the language. So what's important to the users that you're trying to affect their everyday practices with, for instance, your policies.
Yeah.
A lot of time, because I think there's a growing awareness of the human perspective in security, but I also see that it's often addressed through behavioral science. And there's definitely a lot to be gained from that. But as an anthropologist, I mainly see people as social beings. And I think it's very important to also leverage that, because the social is just so powerful.
Yeah.
It has a big power in influencing the way we act and think and so on. And it's what's brilliant about going out into the wild is that you never know what you'll stumble onto. You need to go out there and see what's actually at play.
Yeah.
Because if we just sit in isolation and then try to disseminate something to people, try to send out messages to get them to do something, then we have no idea what the reality is that we're hitting. So I think it's very important to, whether you like it or not, you need to be aware that your actions and policies have a social aspect.
Yeah. And how do you investigate all this? Because you have to go out in the wild. But is that by doing interviews, or is it doing observations? Is it before you scope a project, or is it in the beginning of a project, like you say, okay, we need to do something about policies. Then we go out and investigate. What are the usual steps? It might differ from project to project, but are there some kind of...
I think it's... Well, for me, I do one thing. If I were to recommend what other peoples could do, I think the first and most important step is to actually take a step back and try to look, try to be a bit self-critical of what you're planning to do, and try to see if there's are there some obvious conflicts of interest between what people are doing and wanting to do and what you're trying to get them to do? Do you need some more knowledge about something in this in order to actually make it work? And are there some danger signs? Are there some breaking points where this might actually become difficult to implement? I think it's very important to think about, first of all, what are you actually asking people to do? Because it can seem, human security can seem kind of like a freebie, because if you just think about it as, well, I'm just going to send out an email and then everyone will do something differently, then it seems very much more cheaper than buying a new system or something like that.
Yeah.
Or sending everyone to training. But it's also a very dangerous mindset, because we all have internal budgets of how we can spend our time, our energy, our attention. So, and also the patience factors that we talked about earlier. So it's very important how we spend this human compliance budget.
Yeah.
So we need to have as concrete an understanding as possible of what we are actually asking people to do. And then in the context of our organization, does that seem like a big thing or small thing? Does it seem doable?
Yeah. So you can't just make 100 rules and then expect people to follow, because it would take too much time, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you need to try and be realistic about also how much are we asking people to do already? Is there maybe something we could take away? If we want them to do this new thing, does it maybe replace something that we've asked them to do in the past?
Yeah.
But there's also, again, there's kind of a cultural factor, and that's why it's so important to really know your crowd, to what is acceptable to be asked, and also by whom. So as I said before, it's important who sends this, but organizations are also different cultural spheres. Yeah.
So what you're saying is that it's also kind of hard to make like here's the 3 things you should do, because it's so different from company to company. You really need to understand the place you're working at.
Yeah.
So understanding what are the cultures today and how do people work, because that's also the field you have to play inside when you have to create more security.
Yeah. And it can seem like a bit of a hassle to not just take something off the shelf and go with it, but I think it's important to actually spend that time, because you will end up with better security solutions. You will end up with something that can actually move the needle, that can actually get people to do what you want them to do. So rather than having this ideal that everyone should always do this, and try and figure out where can we meet, where can we get our two worlds to meet.
Yeah.
And actually I read, so going back to fishing, not fishing, I read about a place where they had tried to, because again, what you want people to do is report the emails. That's the one target. Yeah, exactly. And they had tried to achieve that through phishing campaigns, and the people in the office had actually become very mad. They became angry because they said, well, we don't have the time to look critically at every single email that we get, and also we don't have the expertise. You as the IT department, you can hardly just at a single glance say whether something is a true or false email. So they really they got an anti reaction to what they were doing. So instead, what they tried to do was to zoom in on the situation that the users were in, which is this doubt that you're often sitting with. Is should I click this or not? And again, I've also had the experience that you were talking about. I don't want to bother anyone with too many emails.
Yeah.
And also not wanting to block too many emails. So they implemented an I'm not sure button.
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant, because it captures the moment of where your user is. So instead of them having to spend a lot of energy and time trying to figure out something that then actually not very, very well equipped doing, then they will ship it over to IT, and IT will then help them figure it out and put it up on the intranet so other people can check it.
Yeah. Sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
So to sum it up, it's about when you have a project, if you want to implement something, then before just implementing it, try to actually understand the problem, and not just from a technical perspective, but from a social perspective as well.
Yeah. And then I also think that once you're ready with your initiative, it's very helpful to frame how then to communicate this effort that we're doing, because gaining a bigger knowledge of what's important to people out there, then we can also frame this initiative as, how does it fit with your work and what you are here to achieve?
Yeah. I think the last question I have on my notes is if we should try to break all of this down to like 3 tips for people out there in the companies trying to implement cybersecurity measurements, then what could that be?
First of all, trying to adapt this anthropological mindset and taking a step back. You don't need to run out and do interviews right away, but you just start looking at your policies from different angles than your own, and of course also be self-critical that you're not your user. So going forward, I really do encourage you to try and look for ways where you can get feedback, get into dialogue, maybe do some testing or experiments with a couple of employees, or go around the office and ask them, visit different departments, so on. So trying to bridge the gap as much as possible. And then secondly, I think that cross-disciplinary cooperation in security is very, very powerful.
Yeah.
I'm of course myself a representative of that, but I also think that when we look at the very appealing, well-executed, people-centric attacks that we are seeing these years, I would say that the dark side is definitely good at working in a cross-disciplinary way. So we should also do more of that.
So it's not enough only having technical people.
No.
In the way.
No. And then thirdly, be curious and creative, because the better our security initiatives fit fit with our particular organization, culture, people, language, the more likely they are to actually become a part of people's everyday practices.
Yes. Sweet and short.
Yeah.
Short and sweet, I guess it's called. Nice. Then I think we should end it with those 3 tips. And then thank you so much for coming. And people can follow you on LinkedIn if they want to. Or they can follow Alexandra Instituttet with the work that you do. It's really interesting. So I can recommend that, at least.
Thank you.
And then thank you for listening out there. See you next time.